She can't hear us, right? The word sliced through the antiseptic silence of room 347. Marcus Peters stood at the foot of the hospital bed, his Rolex catching the fluorescent light as he checked the door again. Vivienne stepped closer, her Louboutins clicking against linoleum. The doctor said brain dead. Darling, she's basically furniture now. They laughed, both of them, standing 3 feet from Florence Peters, tech billionaire, self-made titan, the woman whose name appeared on Forbes lists and charity galas. They laughed. Before we go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Are you Team Florence or do you think she had this coming? Let's see where my audience is from today. Inside her motionless body, Florence screamed. The machines beat their steady rhythm. The ventilator hissed. Her eyes stared at nothing, pupils fixed and dilated, exactly as they'd been for the past 6 hours since a catastrophic stroke at the Peninsula Hotel's Crystal Ballroom. She'd been giving a speech, something about empowering the next generation of female entrepreneurs, when her vision fractured into prismatic shards and the floor rushed up to meet her. Now, Dr. Patel's words echoed in the void. Massive hemorrhagic stroke. No brain activity. I'm so sorry, Mr. Peters. Except Dr. Patel was wrong. Florence could hear everything, feel everything. The scratch of the hospital gown against the skin, the pressure of the fall in her left hand, the way her right eyelid wouldn't close completely, leaving her eye burning and dry. She just couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't scream. How long do we have to keep up this charade? Vivienne perched on the visitor's chair, crossing her legs. At 32, she was everything Florence had been 20 years ago. Hungry, beautiful, ruthless. Florence had mentored her, for God's sake, brought her into Peters Industries as a junior analyst, watched her climb, watched her fuck Marcus in Florence's own home office, on the Eames sofa, the one Florence had saved 3 years to afford when she was building her first startup in a garage. 28 days minimum before we can pull the plug legally. Marcus scrolled through his phone. I've already talked to the lawyers. With her existing DNR and my power of attorney, it's a formality. 28 days. Florence's mind latched onto the number like a life raft. And the will. Vivienne's voice dropped, honey-sweet and venomous. Everything comes to me. The house in Pacific Heights, the Manhattan penthouse, the villa in Lake Como, the stock portfolio, Peters Industries. Marcus smiled, the same smile that had charmed Florence at a Stanford alumni mixer 15 years ago. $73 billion, give or take. $73 billion, the number she'd built from nothing, from sleeping in her car during her first startup, from being rejected by 127 venture capitalists before the 128th said yes, from 18-hour days and missed birthdays and sacrificed friendships. What about the daughter? Vivienne examined her nails. Florence's heart rate spiked. The monitor betrayed her, beeping faster. Marcus glanced at the machines, then shrugged. Zara hasn't spoken to Florence in 3 years. Not since Florence refused to fund her ridiculous art gallery. She won't contest anything. Good. Vivienne stood, walking to Florence's bedside. She stared down at the woman who'd given her everything. You know what's funny? She actually trusted me. Told me last month she was thinking of making me CFO. She leaned closer, her perfume, Chanel, the same one Florence wore, overwhelming. Stupid bitch never saw it coming. Florence's paralyzed fingers ached to close around Vivienne's throat. We should go. Marcus joined Vivienne at the bedside. The funeral home needs a pre-planning deposit. I was thinking the cathedral. Big, public, lots of press. Then we announce I'm taking over Peters Industries during the mourning period. Perfect. Vivienne kissed him, long and deep, over Florence's body. Inside her frozen skull, Florence made a promise. 28 days. She had 28 days to find a way back. To speak, to move, to destroy them both. As they walked to the door, Vivienne paused. Marcus, what if she can't hear us? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus looked back at his wife's motionless form. Then I hope she enjoys the show. The door clicked shut. Florence lay in the darkness, alone except for the machines and her rage. She tried to move her finger. Nothing. Her toe. Nothing. her tongue, her jaw, her eyelids. Nothing. Nothing. Wait! The heart rate monitor. When Vivienne had spoken, it had spiked. She'd felt her pulse quicken with fury. Florence focused every atom of her consciousness on her heart. Faster. Slower. Faster. The monitor responded, beeping erratically. A nurse rushed in, checked the machines, adjusted something in Florence's fall. Just a little arrhythmia, she muttered, making a note on her tablet. Nothing unusual for this level of trauma. But it wasn't unusual. It was Florence. She was still here, still fighting. And in 28 days, Marcus and Vivienne would learn what happened when you tried to bury Florence Peters alive. The revenge was just beginning. But the question is, how does a woman who can't move or speak destroy the two people who betrayed her? Drop your theories in the comments. This is about to get brutal. 3 days after her death, Florence Peters attended her own memorial planning meeting. Not that Marcus knew she was there. Not that anyone did. She lay in room 347, listening through the baby monitor that a night nurse had accidentally left on the windowsill, the same nurse who'd been on her phone instead of doing rounds, who'd walked away mid-sentence about her boyfriend drama, device still transmitting. Marcus's voice crackled through. The eye sculpture seems excessive, Vivienne. Nothing is excessive. This is Florence Peters. Built a $73 billion empire from nothing. Remember? People expect spectacle. The irony wasn't lost on Florence. They were using her legend to throw a better party. Quick question for my audience. If you were Florence right now, what would be your first move? Comment below and let's see if you're thinking what she's thinking. Inside her paralyzed body, Florence was learning. Her heart rate was a language, the only one she had. Spike it during nurse rounds. Drop it during doctor visits. Create patterns. Make them notice. Most ignored it. Autonomic responses. They'd write, not even looking up. But Dr. Sarah Okoye didn't ignore it. On day 4, the neurologist appeared during the graveyard shift. She was young, maybe 35, with keen eyes and an accent that spoke of Lagos and London. She stood at Florence's bedside for 20 minutes, watching the monitors. Then she did something nobody else had done. She spoke to Florence. Not at her. To her. Mrs. Peters, I'm going to run a test. If you can hear me, and I mean truly hear and comprehend me, I want you to try to change your heart rate. Speed it up for yes. Florence screamed inside her skull. Faster, faster, faster. The monitor erupted into rapid beeping. Dr. Okoye's breath caught. Now slow it down. Florence fought against her own panic, forced herself calm. The beeping steadied. Holy God! Dr. Okoye pulled up a chair, hand shaking as she opened her tablet. You have locked-in syndrome. You're conscious. You're aware. And everyone thinks you're gone. If Florence could have wept, she would have, I need to tell your husband. The heart rate exploded into chaos. No, no, no. Dr. Okoye's eyes widened. You don't want me to tell Marcus. One spike. Yes. Why not? How could Florence explain? She couldn't. Not yet. She focused on keeping her heart rate elevated. Distress, urgency, danger. Okay, I hear you. Dr. Okoye leaned closer, whispering though they were alone. I'm going to help you, Mrs. Peters. But I need to understand what's happening. Do you not trust your husband? One spike. Yes. Did he hurt you? 2 beats. No. Then 1. Yes. Then chaos. Because how do you explain that he didn't cause a stroke but is killing you anyway? Dr. Okoye spent the next hour developing a system. 1 blink for yes. Florence couldn't control her eyes yet, but Dr. Okoye believed she would. 2 for no. Heart rate for urgency. By day 7, Florence could blink. It took everything. Every neuron firing, every synapse screaming, every ounce of will that had built an empire. But her right eyelid closed. Opened. Closed. Dr. Okoye cried. By day 10, they were communicating. Slowly, painfully. Dr. Okoye would recite the alphabet, and Florence would blink at the right letter. HUSBANDKILINGME. I need proof, Dr. Okoye whispered. Something concrete. Otherwise, they'll say I'm insane or that you're confused from brain damage. CHENTISTHIM. Chen Wu had been Florence's executive assistant for 12 years. If anyone could access her private files, her hidden servers, the evidence she'd been gathering. On day 11, Dr. Okoye called Chen from her personal phone. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Chen arrived at the hospital within the hour, sneaking in through the service entrance. He stood at Florence's bedside, this man who'd managed her calendar and screened her calls and knew her coffee order by heart, and broke down completely. "Boss," he whispered, "I knew something was wrong. Marcus fired me yesterday. Said you'd wanted to simplify before... He couldn't say it. Florence blinked once. Yes, I'm here. Help me." Chen pulled himself together with visible effort. "What do you need?" It took 4 to 5 minutes to blink out the instructions. Her home server. Password protected. The basement office Marcus didn't know existed. Files labeled insurance, years of documented affairs, embezzlement, forged signatures. He's been stealing from you. Chen's voice hardened. One blink. For how long? FIVYEAIS. That son of a... Chen caught himself. Okay, I'll get the files. But Florence, what's the plan? Even with evidence, you can't testify. You can't even. IECODTHEM. Dr. Okoye and Chen exchanged looks. You want us to bug your own hospital room? Dr. Okoye asked. One blink. On day 14, a small recording device, bought cash, untraceable, was installed inside the tissue box on Florence's bedside table. Now they just had to wait for Marcus and Vivienne to incriminate themselves. They didn't wait long. Day 16. Marcus and Vivienne arrived late evening, after visiting hours, using Marcus's spousal access. The board meeting is tomorrow, Marcus said, loosening his tie. I'm officially taking over as CEO of Peters Industries. How did the board vote? Vivienne was already pouring champagne. She brought a bottle, had the audacity to celebrate in a hospital room. Unanimously in favor. They think I'm the grieving husband stepping up in a crisis. He laughed. God, if they knew I'd been siphoning funds for years. Florence's heart monitor sang with fury. Dr. Okoye, watching remotely through the nurse's station camera feed, held her breath. What about that assistant? Chen. Vivienne asked. Dealt with. I planted evidence of embezzlement in his work files. If he tries to come forward about anything, he's already discredited. These monsters. These brilliant, thorough monsters. And the wife. Vivienne sipped champagne, studying Florence's face. 12 more days until we pull the plug. I almost wish she could hear us. Wish she knew that everything she built is ours now. Marcus joined her at the bedside. You know what's funny? I never loved her. Not even in the beginning. I saw a lonely, driven woman with more money than sense, and I saw my future. When did you start skimming? Vivienne traced a finger down Marcus's chest. Year 2 of the marriage. Small amounts at first. Then I got bolder. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. She was so busy running her empire, she never noticed her emperor had no clothes. He kissed Vivienne. She gave me power of attorney 3 years ago. Signed everything without reading it. Too trusting. To Florence Peters, Vivienne raised a glass and mock toast. The smartest woman in tech. Too bad she was too stupid to see what was right in front of her face. They laughed. They drank. They kissed over Florence's body like she was already a corpse. And in the tissue box, the recorder captured every word. So Marcus has been stealing for 5 years, and now is framing Chen? Oh, it's about to get real. But here's the question nobody's asking. Where's Florence's daughter Zara in all this? Hit that follow button because part 3, the climax is going to blow your mind. The revenge starts now. Day 28. The day Florence Peters was scheduled to die. Again. The morning arrived with cruel sunshine streaming through room 347's window. Florence had been awake for hours. Not that sleep meant anything anymore. Time was measured in heartbeats and blinks in the countdown to 2 p.m., when her funeral was scheduled to begin. Marcus and Vivienne planned to sign the life support withdrawal papers at 10 a.m. By 11, she'd be dead. By 2, she'd be eulogized. By next week, erased. Except Florence wasn't dying today. Today, she was coming back. Are you ready? Dr. Okoye's whisper cut through the early morning silence. It was 6 a.m. The hospital was changing shifts. In 4 hours, everything would happen. Florence blinked once. Yes, but her heart rate told a different story. It was erratic, genuine fear mixing with determination. 28 days of communication, of building evidence, of watching Marcus dismantle her life piece by piece. 28 days of being a ghost in her own body. What if this didn't work? The door opened. Florence's remaining functional I couldn't see who entered, but she heard the sharp intake of breath. Mom. Zara. Florence's heart monitor exploded into chaos. Drop a comment if you saw this twist coming. Family drama just entered the chat, and it's about to get messy. I know you can hear me. Zara's voice was thick with tears. She came into view, 32 years old, with Florence's dark eyes and her father's defiant chin. The daughter Florence hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Not since the fight. The horrible fight about money and trust in Zara's irresponsible art gallery dreams. Dr. Okoye told me everything. About Marcus, about what you've been planning. Zara's hand found Florence's. The first real human touch in 28 days. I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have known something was wrong when Marcus banned me from visiting. I thought you told him to keep me away. Florence blinked rapidly. No. I know that now. Zara squeezed her hand. Chen showed me everything. The recordings, the evidence, the offshore accounts. Her voice hardened. I also know that Marcus has been spreading rumors that I'm unstable. Drug problems, mental health crisis. All lies to make sure I can't contest a will. The door opened again. Chen entered, followed by Dr. Okoye and 3 people Florence didn't recognize, 2 lawyers and a tech specialist. Chen had explained earlier through painful blink-by-blink conversation. We have 2 hours, Chen said, checking his watch. Marcus and Vivienne will arrive at 10 with their legal team. Hospital administration is expecting the life support withdrawal paperwork. And the press? One of the lawyers asked. Stationed outside the chapel for the 2 p.m. funeral. Over 200 people confirmed attendance. Chen's smile was razor-sharp, including the CEO of every major tech company, half the Silicon Valley venture capital community, and 3 senators. Perfect audience, the other lawyer murmured. Dr. Okoye approached Florence's bedside. Mrs. Peters, we're going to move you to the neurological imaging suite. We need real-time documentation of your brain activity to prove locked-in syndrome beyond any doubt. It's going to be uncomfortable. Florence blinked once. She didn't care about comfort. She cared about revenge. The next 90 minutes were a blur of scans and tests and calibrations. The tech specialist installed eye-tracking software on a tablet. Experimental technology that could translate Florence's eye movements into text. At 9:30 a.m., they moved Florence back to room 347. At 9:47 a.m., Marcus and Vivienne arrived. They weren't alone. 2 lawyers Florence didn't recognize flanked them, carrying briefcases and matching expressions of professional solemnity. Marcus wore a black Tom Ford suit. Vivienne wore widow's weeds, black Dior pearls at her throat. They looked like grief itself. They looked like victory. Let's get this done, Marcus said to the hospital administrator, a nervous man named Morrison who'd been hovering in the hallway. My wife has suffered enough. Of course, Mr. Peters. Dr. Patel is preparing the paperwork. Actually, Dr. Okoye stepped out from the consultation room next door. There's been a development. Marcus's expression flickered, just for a second, into something ugly. Then the mask returned. Dr. Okoye, I thought we'd discuss your inappropriate attachment to this case. You discussed. I continued doing my job. She held up a tablet, which included running comprehensive neurological assessments. Mr. Peters, your wife doesn't have brain death. She has locked-in syndrome. The hallway went silent. That's ridiculous, Vivienne said, but her voice wavered. Is it? Dr. Okoye turned the tablet around. On the screen, Florence's brain scan showed clear, undeniable activity. These are from this morning. Full consciousness, awareness, cognition. Marcus's lawyer stepped forward. That doesn't prove. She can communicate. Dr. Okoye nodded to Chen, who wheeled in a large monitor. Florence's face appeared on screen, shot from the perfect angle to show her eyes. Below it, a text box glowed white and empty. Mrs. Peters, Dr. Okoye said clearly, "Can you hear me?" Florence moved her eyes deliberately across the tracking interface. Letters appeared on screen. "Yes." Vivienne made a sound like a strangled cat. "This is absurd," Marcus said, but he'd gone pale. Some kind of involuntary. "Let's test that theory." Dr. Okoye's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Mrs. Peters, can you tell us who these people are?" Florence's eyes moved faster now, her rage fueling precision. "My husband Marcus and his mistress Vivienne. This is obviously a malfunction." Marcus started. "Mrs. Peters, do you want life support withdrawn?" "No, this is medical malpractice." Marcus turned to Morrison. "I'm her healthcare proxy." Actually, one of the lawyers Chen had brought stepped forward. "You're not. We filed an emergency injunction an hour ago based on Dr. Okoye's findings. And we have some questions about the DNR you claim Mrs. Peters signed." "I have the documents." "The forged documents," Chen said, stepping forward with a tablet of his own. "The ones you fabricated using the signature stamp from Florence's home office. The stamp I watched you use 3 months ago when you thought I'd left for the day." Marcus's face went from pale to crimson. "You're fired. You already fired me. Remember? After you planted fake evidence of embezzlement in my files." Chen's voice was steady, cold. "Evidence that conveniently disappeared from the company's server yesterday when I got building security to review the footage of you deleting it." "Mrs. Peters," Dr. Okoye said, "do you have something you'd like to tell us about your husband and Ms. Vivienne?" Florence's eyes flew across the interface. The words appeared slowly, deliberately. "I heard everything. Play the recording." Chen hit play on his tablet. Marcus's voice filled the hallway. "Everything comes to me. The house in Pacific Heights, the Manhattan penthouse, the villa in Lake Como." Vivienne's laugh. "She actually trusted me. Told me last month she was thinking of making me CFO. Stupid bitch never saw it coming." More recordings. Days of them. Weeks. Every visit, every cruel word, every detail of their conspiracy. You know what's funny? I never loved her. Not even in the beginning. Year 2 of the marriage. Small amounts at first. Then I got bolder. Offshore accounts, shell companies. To Florence Peters, the smartest woman in tech. Too bad she was too stupid to see what was right in front of her face. Morrison looked like he might vomit. The lawyers were already on their phones. Marcus lunged for the tablet, but hospital security was already moving in. Chen had arranged for that too. "You can't. This is a legal recording." In a private hospital room where you had no expectation of privacy, one of the lawyers said. "Try again." Vivienne tried to run. Zara stepped in front of the elevator, arms crossed. "Going some way?" Florence's daughter asked sweetly. "My mother and I have some catching up to do." "Florence." Marcus turned to the screen, to his wife's eyes blazing with consciousness and fury. "Please, I can explain." Florence's eyes moved. "Explain to the police." And there they were, stepping off the elevator. Detective Rodriguez and her partner, alerted an hour ago by Chen with evidence of fraud, embezzlement, attempted murder via medical proxy, and conspiracy. The handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists with perfect symmetry, around Vivienne's with perfect justice. "You were dead," Vivienne hissed as they dragged her past Florence's room. "You were supposed to be dead." Florence's eyes moved one final time. "I got better." The hallway erupted. Press appeared from nowhere. Chen had leaked it, of course, tipped off every major outlet about a major development in the Florence Peters case. Cameras captured Marcus and Vivienne's perp walk. Reporters shouted questions. The story was already going viral. In room 347, Zara collapsed into the chair beside her mother's bed, laughing and crying at once. "That," she said, "was the most badass thing I've ever seen." Dr. Okoye checked Florence's vitals, but she was smiling. "How do you feel, Mrs. Peters?" Florence's eyes found the interface one more time. Alive. Outside, the cathedral was still decorated for funeral. The flowers were already arranged. The program was printed. 200 people were arriving to mourn Florence Peters. Instead, they were about to witness her resurrection. 6 weeks after the world watched Marcus and Vivienne's arrest go viral, Florence Peters sat in a wheelchair at the head of a conference table she designed herself. She still couldn't walk, could barely speak above a whisper. Her right hand trembled constantly, and simple tasks like holding a pen required assistance. But her mind, that empire-building, deal-making, ruthless mind, was sharper than ever, motioned to approve Chen Wu as permanent CEO of Peters Industries. Her voice came out raspy, damaged, but unmistakably hers. The board voted unanimously. Chen, sitting to her right, looked like he might cry, motioned to approve Zara Peters as Chief Operating Officer. Another unanimous vote. Zara squeezed her mother's trembling hand. This wasn't the triumphant return Florence had once imagined. There were no stadium appearances, no inspirational TED Talks, no magazine covers proclaiming her miraculous recovery, because the truth was messier than that. Recovery from locked-in syndrome was brutal, slow, and incomplete. Here's what they don't show you in the movies, the real cost of survival. But stick with me, because what Florence does next will change everything you think about success. The physical therapy sessions were agony, relearning to swallow, to speak, to move fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. Florence, who'd once commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals, now celebrated the victory of lifting a spoon to her mouth. Some days, she wanted to quit. "I built an empire," she whispered to Zara during a particularly difficult session, tears streaming down her face as her hand refused to cooperate. "And now I can't even button my own shirt." "You survived an attempted murder and brought down the people who tried to bury you," Zara said, guiding her mother's fingers through the motion again. "I'd say that's pretty epic." But the harder recovery was emotional. The trial lasted 3 months. Marcus got 15 years for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder through medical neglect. Vivienne got 12. Their lawyers tried every angle, claiming the recordings were inadmissible, that Florence's eye-tracking testimony was unreliable, that locked-in syndrome made her an unreliable witness. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Florence watched the verdict from a video link in her home, the new home, the accessible one, not the Pacific Heights mansion that Marcus had already started redecorating. She felt empty, not triumphant, not vindicated, just exhausted. "I thought I'd feel different," she told Dr. Okoye during a follow-up appointment. "I thought revenge would feel better than this." "Revenge isn't healing," Dr. Okoye said gently. "It's just revenge. The healing comes next, and it's harder." The hardest part was confronting her own culpability. Florence had built an empire, yes, but she'd done it by sacrificing everything else. She'd missed Zara's graduation because of a merger, skipped her father's funeral for a board meeting. Her friendships were transactional. Her marriage was a contract she never bothered to read carefully. "I was so focused on building something that couldn't be taken from me," she told Zara one evening, sitting in the modest living room of her new townhouse, "that I never noticed when someone was stealing it piece by piece." "Marcus was a con artist," Zara said. "That's not your fault, isn't it?" Florence's words were clearer now, after months of speech therapy. "I chose ambition over attention, success over connection. I married a man I barely knew because he looked good in a tuxedo and said the right things at fundraisers. I mentored Vivienne because she reminded me of my younger self, hungry and ruthless, without asking if ruthless was really something to aspire to." Zara was quiet for a long moment. "You were lonely." "I was terrified," Florence corrected. "Terrified of being poor again, of losing everything I'd built. So I kept building higher, thinking that if I was successful enough, important enough, wealthy enough, I'd finally feel safe." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I built a prison and handed the keys to people who wanted me dead." But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid ground to rebuild on. Florence started small. Weekly dinners with Zara. No phones allowed. Actual conversations about art and dreams and the 3 years they'd lost. Apologies, real ones, for the ways Florence had treated her daughter like an investment that hadn't paid off rather than a person she loved. She reconnected with old friends, real friends, from before the billions, people who'd known her when she was sleeping in her car and eating ramen. People who visited her in the hospital not for networking, but because they cared. She met with Chen weekly, but they didn't just discuss business. They discussed his husband, his recent adoption, his dreams beyond being an assistant to a billionaire. "I want you to build your own thing," Florence told him. "Use Peters Industries as your launching pad, not your destination." The old Florence would have called that bad business. The new Florence called it mentorship. 3 months post-trial, Florence announced a dissolution of 60% of her personal wealth. $73 billion became $29 billion overnight. The rest went to the Florence Peters Foundation for Neurological Research, with a specific focus on locked-in syndrome, patient advocacy, and reforming healthcare proxy laws. The business press called her crazy. Billionaire gives away fortune after near-death experience. The headline screamed, with undertones suggesting brain damage had made her irrational. Florence didn't care. She also didn't care when she sold the mansion, the penthouse, the villa. She kept the townhouse, 3 bedrooms, accessible design, walking distance to Zara's gallery, and a modest apartment in Manhattan for business. "Don't you miss it?" a reporter asked during her first post-recovery interview. "The wealth? The power? The empire?" Florence looked at the camera, her words still slow but deliberate. "I died, and while I was dead, I realized I'd been living wrong. So no, I don't miss a version of my life where I was so isolated that the only people at my bedside wanted me to die." But was giving away billions really the answer? Or was there something else Florence learned that money couldn't teach her? The final chapter is coming, and it's not what you expect. The documentary crew was packing up when Zara arrived with a sketchbook. She'd been designing the new art gallery, the one Florence was funding, no strings attached. "Mom," Zara said, "I need your opinion on something." "Not your money, not your connections, your opinion." Florence looked at her daughter's designs and felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not happiness. That was still a work in progress. Not fulfillment. She was still figuring out what that meant. But peace. The quiet knowledge that she was finally building something that mattered. Something that couldn't be stolen because it wasn't about ownership. It was about connection. Outside, the San Francisco fog rolled in. Tomorrow, Florence had physical therapy at 8, a board meeting at 10, and lunch with her father's old poker buddies, 70-something retired teachers who'd known her before she was anyone special. The empire could wait. For the first time in 30 years, Florence Peters had learned something more valuable than how to build a business. She'd learned how to build a life. What happens when you lose everything and gain what matters most, and the lesson she learned will hit you right in the heart. 1 year after she died and came back, Florence Peters stood at a podium. Well, not stood exactly. She still used a wheelchair most days. Her legs had regained some function, enough to walk short distances with a cane, but standing for long speeches wasn't happening yet. Maybe it never would. The auditorium was packed, not with tech bros and venture capitalists this time, with patients, families, caregivers, neurologists, people who understood what locked-in syndrome meant because they lived it every day. Florence gripped the microphone with her still trembling right hand. Her left hand was steadier now, but she kept both visible. No hiding the damage. No pretending she'd bounce back effortlessly. "My name is Florence Peters," she began, her voice stronger now after months of therapy, "and I'm going to tell you the truth about what it's like to die while you're still alive." The audience leaned forward. For the next 40 minutes, Florence told her story. Not the sanitized version the press had run. Not the inspirational comeback narrative. The real story. The terror of being trapped in her own body. The rage of hearing her husband plan her funeral. The exhaustion of communicating one blink at a time. The shame of needing help with everything. The grief of losing the person she used to be. "I thought recovery meant getting back to who I was," Florence said. "Building the next company. Making the next billion. Proving I was still Florence Peters, tech titan, empire builder, force of nature." She paused, And in that pause, the audience felt the weight of everything she'd lost. But that Florence Peters is gone. The stroke took her. And you know what? Good riddance. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Because that Florence Peters was lonely. She was driven by fear disguised as ambition. She measured success in zeros on a bank statement and square footage in real estate. She sacrificed her relationships on the altar of achievement. And when she ended up in a hospital bed, the only two people who came to visit wanted her dead. Florence looked at Zara, sitting in the front row, and smiled. The woman I am now is slower, weaker. She can't work 18-hour days. She needs help buttoning her shirts and cutting her food. She'll never run another marathon or give a speech without trembling. Florence's voice strengthened. But she has her daughter back. She has real friends. She knows the names of her neighbors. She volunteers at a community center teaching coding to kids who remind her of her younger self, hungry and brilliant and broke. She gestured to the banner behind her, the Florence Peters Foundation for Neurological Research and Patient Advocacy. This foundation has funded research for 47 hospitals, provided communication devices for 200 locked-in syndrome patients, and changed healthcare proxy laws in 12 states. We've trained 500 doctors to recognize locked-in syndrome. We prevented 23 premature life support withdrawals that we know of. The audience erupted in applause. But here's what I'm most proud of, Florence continued when the room quieted. Last month, a woman named Sarah, locked in for 6 months. Family thought she was gone, used the eye-tracking technology we developed to tell her kid she loved them. That's my empire now. Not buildings or stock prices. Moments. Connections. Lives. And here's where Florence's story teaches us something that every billionaire movie gets wrong. After the speech, Florence sat in the foundation's garden with Zara, Chen, and Dr. Okoye. They become her inner circle, not employees or assets, but family. Your mother called today, Zara said, scrolling through her phone. She wants to know if you're coming to Thanksgiving. Florence Peters, who'd once scheduled family gatherings 6 months in advance and frequently canceled for work, smiled. Tell her yes, and ask what I can bring. You could bring that cranberry sauce you used to make, Dr. Okoye suggested, before you became too important to cook. I was never too important, Florence said quietly. I was just too scared. Scared that if I slowed down, someone would see I was just a girl from nowhere who got lucky. Scared that connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant someone could hurt me. Someone did hurt you, Chen pointed out. Yes, but I hurt myself first. Florence watched the sun set over the San Francisco skyline, the city where she'd built everything and lost it all and built something better. I spent 30 years building walls I called success. Marcus and Vivienne didn't break me. I was already broken. They just showed me what I'd become. Zara took her mother's trembling hand. And what have you become now? Florence thought about the question, about the wheelchair and the tremors and the speech that still slurred when she was tired, about the billions she'd given away and the empire she'd dismantled, about the daughter she'd reconnected with and the lives her foundation was saving. Human, she said finally. I've become human again. Here's a lesson Florence Peters learned, and it's one every single one of us need to hear. Success without connection is just expensive loneliness. All the money, all the power, all the achievement in the world means nothing if you're so isolated that the people at your deathbed are rooting for death. Florence built a $73 billion empire and nearly lost everything that mattered. She had to die to learn how to live. She had to lose her body to find her soul. She had to fall to the absolute bottom to understand that the top was just another kind of prison. The real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the people who show up when you can't show up for yourself. It's in the daughter who forgives you, the assistant who risks everything to save you, the doctor who sees you when everyone else has stopped looking. It's in becoming someone worth coming back to. Florence Peters died in that hospital bed. But the woman who came back was richer than she'd ever been, not in spite of what she'd lost, but because of it. If this story moved you, taught you something, or made you think differently about success, do me a favor. Subscribe to Billionaire Dawn Stories right now. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join a community that believes there's more to success than the balance in your bank account. We tell stories about billionaires not to worship wealth, but to explore what happens when people have everything and discover it's not enough. Stories about loss and redemption, betrayal and revenge, power and the price we pay for it. Drop a comment below telling me, what would you do with 28 days if you couldn't move or speak but could hear everything? What would you learn about the people in your life? New stories drop every week. Next up, the billionaire who faked his own death to test his children's love. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. This is Billionaire Dawn Stories, where we explore the truth that every billionaire learns eventually. You can buy everything except what matters most. Subscribe, share this video, and remember Florence Peters the next time you're tempted to sacrifice connection for success. Because life is short, and you never know when you might lose the ability to tell people you love them. Don't wait for a hospital bed to figure out what really matters.